Every bad cyberpunk story has a lazy antagonist. Evil Corp, Generatech, Omni company that wants to control everything. You click this video because you want to make your Megacorp better and not feel as boring. And I'm going to show you how to do that. Today I'm breaking down how to build a mega corporation that feels real, using the Japanese Zaibatsu system and combining it with a little bit of digital feudalism. We're going to cover how monopolies really form, why your megacorp should function like a government, not a business, and the archetypes that will really make them terrifying. But here's the question most writers will miss. If your megacorp is so powerful, why hasn't it collapsed yet? Let's find out. The first thing that a lot of writers confuse when it comes to mega corporations is that they don't typically start as evil monopolies. They start by solving a real world problem better than anyone else. Think about it this way. Think about the Tyrell Corporation in Blade Runner. You know, they created replicants because humanity needed off-world workers. Weyland Yutani in the Alien series, well, they made space travel possible. You know, and also that applies to our real world examples. Look at Amazon, started as a bookseller. You know, it's very simple. Your lazy evil corporation that wants power, no one's gonna work there. Let's be honest. No one would buy their product. They'd collapse in a single generation. So my tip for building a credible, realistic evil corporation is to figure out what made them indispensable in the first place. For my Cyberpunk academia story, my company, Kishiro Corporation, basically helped unify and update Japan's infrastructure when it came to those companies. Someone had to come through and kind of unite the country's overall infrastructure when it came to these things, preventing a cyber collapse and ultimately taking over. Essentially, they weren't trying to become the government. They just became someone who had to. And ultimately, that's how monopolies work. They fill a vacuum. So before you start writing anything else, ask yourself this: what did your megacorp do first that made everyone depend on them? Now here's the shift that makes my story and maybe some future Japanese cyberpunk stories different from their Western counterparts. It's a Zaibatsu system, and for those who don't know, click on the video below in the description to learn more about this system. Basically, in Western cyberpunk, corporations are hyper-capitalists, ruthless profit machines. Japanese cyberpunk though, they're feudal. They're not trying to maximize their quarterly earnings. Rather, they're running the government with lords and vassals. For example, let me show you how this works in my story. First, you have the Kishiro Corporation. Its CEO effectively serves as a shogun. The executives who help him, they're daimyo, regional lords with their territories and armies. And by the way, the class underneath them, the samurai, the employees. Which brings you to my protagonist, Eiji. He's not an employee yet, and eventually he'll get moved into samurai status. Ultimately here, the loyalty isn't a paycheck, it's to his CEO. And that's where the mind shift is when it comes to kind of switching up your Japanese influences in cyberpunk. By doing this will change everything about your mega corporation and how it functions. Employees aren't just workers, they're subjects. They're people who are loyal to the bigger picture. Departments aren't necessarily business units, they're fiefdoms. Promotions aren't always about merit, they're about loyalty and lineage. Internal politics isn't about completing projects, rather it's a series of succession wars. At the end of all this is, your mega corporation doesn't need to act like a government, it already is one. And that's the terrifying part. Here is a cyberpunk hot take for you. Western cyberpunk writers have it backwards. We write mega corporations like they're capitalist nightmares. Profit among people, shareholders, quarterly reports, you know, the good stuff. But you know the scariest types of corporations in history? They weren't businesses, they were governments. Let's take a look at the Dutch East Indian Company, the British East India Company. They weren't just corporations. They had armies, they collected taxes, they waged wars, they executed criminals. They were feudal states wearing corporate masks. And that's why Japanese cyberpunk will understand that. And I think that's why we write it. When a corporation is a feudal institution instead of a capitalistic, you unlock something more disturbing. The corporation just doesn't want your money. It wants your loyalty. It wants your identity. It wants you to believe that the hierarchy is natural, that your place in the system is ordained. That's how to make a megacorp feel real and terrifying. So when you sit down to design your megacorp, you have three basic archetypes to choose from. The first one is the infrastructure corporation. This is very much like my story in Kishiro. They control everything: water, power, connectivity, and travel. They don't need to be aggressive, well, because you, the reader, and the people in the story literally cannot live without them. Their vulnerability though? Internal succession wars. When the shogun dies, the empire fractures. The second type is the military corp. Think Arasaka and Militech in the Cyberpunk 2077 world. They sell violence as a service. They're almost traditional capitalists, but the vulnerability exists is external. They're only as strong as their last war. Lose a conflict, lose your contracts, lose your empire. And the last one is the cultural corp. No one likes to talk about this, but think about this as the one that controls information, entertainment, identity itself. This megacorp doesn't sell products. It sells you the story of who you are. Their vulnerability, irrelevance. Cultural shifts will happen, and suddenly no one cares about them anymore. Pick one of these, build from there, and most importantly, give them a vulnerability that's baked in the archetype that makes them feel real. So let's quickly recap. Your megacorporation needs a founding problem to be solved. That is the first thing you need to identify. From there, it should act more like a feudal government than a business, and they also need a vulnerability baked into the archetype, whether it's infrastructure, military, or cultural. Now, I want to know, what's your favorite megacorporation from fiction? Weyland Yutani, Tyrell Corp, Arasaka? Drop your answers in the comments below and tell me the archetype which they are. If you're building a megacorporation in your novel, here's some homework for you. Write down the answers to these 3 questions. The first, what problem did it solve? Second, what is their structure and how does it relate to a government type? And third, what's their vulnerability? Answer those and your world building will essentially write itself. If you want to see more tips and how this Japanese cyberpunk corporation will be in my 90,000 word novel that I'm drafting during the Read Scene novel sprint, check out this video here about the plans. And thanks for watching.